and she governs his choices. They sent spiritual attacks, but you were untouchable. It always started at 3:00 on, not with a bang, but a whisper. A chill in the room, a weight in the air. No smoke, no shadows. Something? You'd wake up with your heart pounding, not from fear, but from a knowing. Something unseen had brushed against your soul. It's like hands trying to reach in, but finding themselves locked out. You didn't know it yet, but the attack had already begun. Silent, spiritual, specific. Someone somewhere was speaking your name in shadows. But heaven had already sealed it in light. They lit candles. You lit prayers. They summoned darkness. You carried fire. Father, they tried to curse you, but the curse collapsed. So, if your dreams have felt like battlegrounds, if your spirit's been screaming but your mouth stayed quiet, this isn't your imagination. This is your confirmation. And if you are God's chosen one, this message was written in heaven with your name on it.
The night they tried it, you didn't see the ritual. You didn't hear the chanting. You didn't even know who whispered your name when the moon was high. But something in your spirit did. It was a regular night. No thunder, no lightning. Just silence, heavy enough to make your soul flinch. The kind of stillness that doesn't soothe. The kind that signals something just shifted. You couldn't explain it. But the air in your room changed. Not cold, not warm, just off. Like the atmosphere had been touched by something it shouldn't have. The dreams you had that night, they weren't dreams. They were battlegrounds. And you didn't even know you were fighting. You woke up heavy, tired in your bones, words caught in your throat. You brushed it off as exhaustion, but your spirit whispered otherwise. You're being watched. That week, things went sideways. People acted strange. Conversations you never started turned into arguments. Electronics flickered. Plans unraveled. Your energy drained. You almost blamed yourself. Almost thought you were going crazy. But deep down, you knew this wasn't life being life. This was something spiritual. Someone sent something. But here's the part that didn't make sense. You were still standing. Yes, bruised. Yes, confused. Yes, tired, but still here. Because what they didn't know, what you hadn't even fully realized, was that you weren't just anybody. You were marked. You were wrapped in a covering they couldn't penetrate. They sent the curse, but heaven sent angels. And the darkness? It hit a wall. A divine wall. The battle started that night, but so did the proof. Proof that you were never unprotected. Proof that the attack was never bigger than the assignment. Proof that even before you knew you were chosen, you were already covered. So now the question echoes in your soul. What happens when dark forces rise but fail to land? And here comes the answer. They Wake Up the Warrior, Part 1, Whispers in the Dark. When spiritual attacks begin in silence. It started with little things. A restless night. A sudden chill in the room that wasn't caused by the wind. The sound of something shifting in the spirit, though nothing physical had moved. You'd open your eyes in the middle of the night. Heart racing, thoughts loud. Yet the world around you was dead still. Not still like peace. Still like warning. There was no knock on the door. No voice in the hallway. No chaos that could explain the unease inside you. But your body knew. Your spirit knew. Something had entered the atmosphere. Something uninvited. And if you're honest, it didn't feel like a nightmare. It felt like someone tried to enter and was denied. It's a strange thing, spiritual warfare. Most people expect it to come like a storm. Dramatic, loud, obvious. But for the chosen, the warfare often arrives like a whisper. Not because the enemy is soft, but because he's strategic. If he can't break you openly, he'll try to drain you secretly. And so he creeps in at night. into your thoughts, into your dreams, into the quiet corners of your spirit, hoping to plant confusion where clarity once lived. You start forgetting your strength. You start questioning your worth. You start doubting what God already confirmed. Not because you changed, but because something tried to interfere. And maybe that's where you were, lying in bed, tossing and turning, not from physical pain, but from a weight you couldn't explain, a sense that the air was thick with something your eyes couldn't see, a war your soul could feel, that your mind couldn't name. You woke up tired, but not just physically, tired in a way that no nap could fix, as if you'd been running all night in the spirit, fighting off something unseen, and somehow you won, but no one saw it. There was no medal, no ceremony, just exhaustion. And maybe that's the part that broke your heart the most. You survived a battle no one knew you were in. You defeated something no one even believed existed. And when you tried to explain it, your dreams, your heaviness, your fatigue, your intuition, people laughed. They said, "You're just stressed. You're imagining things. You're being dramatic." But you weren't. You were discerning. Because only the chosen feel when the air shifts. Only the anointed sense when their name is being whispered in wounds they've never entered. And only those who carry light can feel when darkness starts to circle, not to consume, but to probe, to test your borders, to see if you're distracted, to check if your armor has slipped, to wonder if your fire's gone dim. You ever notice how the enemy doesn't strike when you're far from God? He strikes when you're getting closer, right when you've started praying again, right when you've begun to trust again, right when you said, "Yes, Lord," even though it still hurt. Because that's the moment the enemy fears most, the moment you begin to remember who you are. That's when the whispers get louder. That's when the warfare gets stranger. That's when relationships shift, plans unravel, and your spirit feels like it's been stretched across realms. You're not imagining it. You're encountering it. The spiritual world does not sleep, and neither does the enemy. But here's the truth the darkness hates. Neither does God. Somewhere where you slept, an attack was launched. But somewhere higher, God issued a decree. "Touch not my anointed, do my prophets no harm." Psalm 105:15. And that's why you're still here. Not because you were stronger than the spell, but because the spell wasn't stronger than your covering. They tried to send confusion, but heaven surrounded you with clarity. They tried to send fatigue, but angels stood guard at the foot of your bed. They tried to send fear, but your spirit sealed in Christ stared it down. You don't even know how many battles you've survived in your sleep. How many fires were sent your way but fizzled on impact. How many names were whispered in shadows, but heaven refused to echo them. You'll never know it all, but your survival is proof. And yet, you still carry the residue, the question marks, the tension, the low hum of spiritual static that won't go away. You've walked into rooms and felt it, eyes lingering, conversations shifting, a strange fog that settles when you enter. That's not paranoia. That's presence. You shift atmospheres just by showing up. You stir what's hidden. You disturb what's dormant. You reveal what hoped to stay in the dark. And that, more than anything, makes you a target. You're not attacked because you're weak. You're attacked because you carry something holy, something disruptive, something sacred. Your very existence exposes falsehood.
Your eyes carry light that makes shadows tremble. Your words pierce spiritual fog like a sword. Even when you're silent, you're loud in the spirit. That's why they tried to distract you. That's why the enemy whispered at night. That's why the attacks came before the breakthrough. Because the enemy saw your rise before you did. He knew what was waking up inside of you. He felt the shift before you could name it. And so In a last-ditch effort, he tried to shake your core. Before you stepped into calling, he tried to confuse your identity. Before you declared your authority, he tried to break your clarity. Before you opened your mouth to speak. And still, here you are, standing, breathing, praying, becoming. So if you've felt it, the sleepless nights, the silent war, the whispered attacks, the invisible hands trying to tug at your peace, you're not alone. You are not weak. You are not unstable. You are not overreacting. You are aware. You are covered. You are chosen. And the whispers in the dark, they were never stronger than the roar of heaven's decree. This one is mine. And if that's true, if you believe it, even now, then say this with your spirit. I'm still here. And the attack failed. And now I rise.
Part 2. Heaven's security system. Why it didn't land. They launched it, but it didn't land. The curse. The words spoken in shadows. The ritual done in secrecy. The energy aimed like a dart at your destiny. It was crafted carefully, by hands that once clapped for you, by lips that once praised you, but now burned with envy. They thought it would reach you. They were sure it would, because to them it had worked before, on others. Why not you? You weren't louder. You weren't richer. You weren't more powerful on the outside. But what they didn't see was the invisible shield surrounding your life. For he will command his angels concerning you to guard you in all your ways. Psalm 91:11. You've felt it before, haven't you? That strange protection, where you should have lost your mind, but didn't. Where you should have lashed out, but didn't. Where you should have crumbled, but instead, you glowed. It wasn't denial. It wasn't luck. It wasn't ignorance. It was insulation, a spiritual firewall. Heaven had already arranged. What hell didn't anticipate. While they were speaking your name into mirrors, angels were surrounding you like flames, not to burn, but respond to the plate. Here's what they didn't know. Heaven's security system isn't just alarms and lightning. It's timing, it's placement, it's divine interception. Sometimes the curse didn't land because you left the room right before it was released. Sometimes it didn't land because the person they used got distracted. Sometimes it didn't land because your spirit simply rejected it. You're not just covered. You're coded, marked, signed in a frequency that darkness can't comprehend. They launched the ritual at 2:00 a.m., but by 1:55 you had already whispered a prayer. And in the spirit realm, that was enough to shift the entire outcome. You didn't see it. But heaven recalibrated your atmosphere in response to that quiet, weary whisper. God, please cover me tonight. You didn't know it, but angels don't need volume, just agreement. That's the power of being chosen. It's not that nothing will ever come against you. It's that nothing formed against you will prosper. And every time a dart is thrown, there's a divine redirection in motion. The reason they're confused is because their rituals usually work, but just not on you, because you're not just aware, you're not just an empath, you're not just spiritually sensitive, you're sealed. You remember that night, don't you? You woke up choking on air, your heart racing, your hands trembling. You didn't know what was happening. You prayed, you cried, you anointed your door. And the next day, things were quiet again. You thought it was just panic, but in the spirit it was a shutdown. Heaven cancelled the attack. The curse didn't land because the covering never lifted. They thought you were like everyone else, vulnerable, unarmed, unaware. But what they didn't know is that you walk with a covenant. Your name is on a scroll. Your path is guarded by those who do not sleep. You carry oil that cannot be duplicated, and your mere presence causes demonic blueprints to unravel. You are a divine contradiction, attacked but advancing, targeted but thriving, hit but never halted. This is why people don't understand your resilience. They see the storm, but they don't see the shelter. They see the fire, but not the fourth man walking with you in the flames. They see the setup, but they don't realize the trap they dug was the pit they'd fall into. Whoever digs a pit will fall into it. If someone rolls a stone, it will roll back on them. Proverbs 26:27. Heaven has a pattern, a holy reversal, not just protecting you from destruction, but returning to sender everything aimed at your soul. You want to know why it didn't land? Because God didn't permit it. Because while they called on spirits, you were carried by one. Because while they chanted under the moon, your name was spoken in heaven. Because while they lit candles, you walked with fire. Because while they cast shadows, you stood in the light. Because while they tried to curse you, God had already called you blessed. And what God has blessed, no one can curse. So next time your spirit feels a shift, don't panic. Pray. Stand still. Declare, I am covered. I am chosen. And no weapon formed against me shall prosper. Let the darkness try. Let the enemy reach. Because nothing can touch what heaven has already marked as untouchable. Part 3. Marked before you knew it. Marked before you knew it. Marked before you knew it. The secretion and hidden manifest. Before you even had language for calling, they were already watching. Before you ever prayed your first real prayer, someone saw the glow. You didn't notice it, because you thought everyone was like you. But they did. How they noticed. They noticed how peace followed you into rooms. How even when you said nothing, something about your presence made people uncomfortable, or unexpectedly calm. As a child, you didn't have the words for it, but the atmosphere always responded to you, and some people loved you for it, while others couldn't stand you, not because you were cruel, but because you carried something. They could feel but couldn't explain, and it threatened their darkness. You were marked early, spiritually branded, long before titles, gifts, or platforms. The enemy saw it first, and sadly, so did some people close to you. The strange glances, the backhanded compliments, the sudden shift in friendships, the betrayal that came from people who once adored you. It didn't make sense, because you never wronged them. You just kept rising. Even when you fell, you rose differently, with more grace, more light, more favor. And that's what they couldn't understand. They weren't reacting to what you did. They were reacting to what you carried. Just like Saul with David. David hadn't done anything wrong, but the more favor David walked in, the more torment Saul carried. Saul was afraid of David because the Lord was with David but had departed from Saul. 1 Samuel 18:12. You've been wondering why certain people changed on you, why you didn't get invited, why the room got quiet when you entered, why your peace seemed to provoke tension. Here's the truth. It was never about you. It was about your oil. There's a spiritual frequency inside you, one that disturbs dormant demons. You don't have to speak. Just showing up is enough to trigger what others buried. They saw you rising while you were still crawling. They feared your future while you were still healing. They hated the throne before you even left the wilderness. It didn't matter that you weren't confident yet. They still saw the crown forming. That's what frightened them, because they knew if this one ever discovers who they really are, nothing will stop them. So they did what most wounded spirits do. They tried to break what they couldn't control. This is why you've had to fight so hard for clarity. Why your identity has been under attack since the beginning. Why you've questioned your worth, even after evidence of grace surrounded you. Because when the world reflects confusion at your light, you start to wonder if the light was ever there at all. But it was. It is. and it always has been. You were chosen before you knew the meaning of the word, called before you even responded, marked before you ever saw the mark. Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Jeremiah 1:5. And now, you're starting to remember. You're seeing patterns in your past that once seemed random, the friendships that ended right before elevation, the sickness that hit right before breakthrough, the betrayal that came the same week your spirit awakened. These weren't coincidences. They were counterattacks. Because when God begins to activate what's inside you, hell doesn't wait for an invitation. It reacts. The enemy didn't launch attacks because you were weak. He did it because you were waking up, and that terrified him. You are dangerous to darkness, not because of what you know, but because of who you are. Your being is a disruption. Your obedience is a threat. Your alignment is a weapon, and that's why they saw it first. But here's the beauty. You don't have to prove your power. You don't have to explain your calling. You don't have to defend the mark. You just have to walk in it. You were marked for movement. Were marked for light. Marked for kingdom. So let them keep guessing. Let them keep watching. Because heaven already confirmed it. You are chosen, and no curse can override that. Part 4. The Backfire. What was meant to curse you, crowned you. There are laws in the spirit realm, unseen rules, heaven-backed protocols. And one of the most unbreakable is this. Whatever they meant for evil, God will turn for good. It's not just a comforting phrase. It's a law, a holy reversal written in blood and bound in covenant. So when they tried to curse you, they triggered something they couldn't undo. A divine ricochet, a sacred backfire. Because what they didn't realize was that the moment they aimed at you, they handed heaven a blueprint for your next elevation. It's hard to explain this kind of justice. It doesn't come with confetti. It doesn't always come with applause. Sometimes it shows up as an unexpected opportunity after loss. Sometimes it shows up as peace when chaos should have taken over. Sometimes it shows up in your glow. You didn't retaliate. You didn't return their hate. You didn't curse them back. You just stayed silent and glowed. And that glow, that's how the backfire begins. They wanted to drain your power, but the battle only deepened your anointing. They tried to isolate you, but the silence became your sanctuary. They wanted you angry, bitter, and broken, but you emerged rested, rooted, and radiant. They cast shadows, but all they did was reveal your light, and the very energy they tried to use against you became the confirmation of your calling. That's the irony of spiritual warfare. It makes you stronger. It sharpens your discernment. It deepens your worship. It exposes the fake and reveals the divine. You don't just bounce back. You rise, transform. What they meant to sabotage, God used to strategize. What they meant to bury you with, God used to plant you deeper. They thought it was your end, but it was the beginning. Think of Joseph, thrown in a pit, sold as a slave, falsely accused, forgotten in prison. But when Pharaoh needed someone who could interpret dreams and carry wisdom, Joseph was the only one qualified. Why? Because the pit had trained him, the betrayal had refined him, the prison had taught him strategy, and the curse became his crown. You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good. Genesis 50:20. Chosen one, that's you. They meant to break you, but they built you. They meant to silence you, but now your voice carries weight. They meant to steal your peace, but now your presence shifts atmospheres. What was meant to be your funeral turned into your coronation. They burned sage. You burned brighter. They whispered curses. You whispered worship. They summoned shadows. You stood in the light. And now the law of the Spirit has kicked in. The pit they dug for you, is the one they'll fall into. Some of them are unraveling now. You've noticed it. The ones who moved strange. The ones who ghosted you for no reason. The ones who threw shade while pretending to smile. They're quiet now, but not because they've changed. They're quiet because the backfire has begun. They feel the shift. They see the glow. And now they're realizing they came against someone covered, someone chosen, someone they never had the authority to curse. This isn't karma. This is kingdom. This is the God who says, I will contend with those who contend with you. Isaiah 49:25. This is the Lord who prepares a table before you, in the presence of your enemies. Not because he's petty, but because he's just. Because he wants it to be known. You are always protected, always seen, always favored. So let them stare. Let them wonder why every attack elevated you. Why you're glowing after grief. Why the weapon formed but never prospered. The answer is simple. You are the evidence of the backfire, the proof of the prophecy, the living testimony that God gets the final say. So walk like it, shine like it, pray like it, speak like it, because you've just witnessed a reversal. Only heaven could orchestrate. The curse didn't work, and the crown couldn't be stopped. Part 5, The Silent Fire. Why you still glowed when nobody clapped. You didn't wait for applause. You didn't wait for confirmation or crowds, for someone to finally say, wow, look at you. You just kept moving, kept glowing, kept becoming, not because it was easy, but because your fire wasn't borrowed. It was born in silence. The truth is, you've carried a silent fire for years, one that burned without being seen, a holy flame that never made a sound, but refused to go out. It flickered in prayer closets. It whispered in midnight tears. It roared in the silence after betrayal. And even when nobody clapped, you glowed. You learned how to rise without an audience. You learned how to survive without a support system. You learned how to glow even when the light around you dimmed. That's not normal. That's divine, because what you've carried isn't just resilience. It's anointing, a sacred glow born of obedience, not recognition. There were seasons you should have lost your light, when the weight of disappointment should have crushed your spirit. You fasted with no breakthrough. You prayed and heard silence. You gave and got betrayed. You showed up for others who vanished when you needed them. And still, you glowed, not because you were trying to impress heaven, but because something inside you knew, even if no one sees me, God does. They didn't clap for you, but heaven whispered, that one's mine. They didn't celebrate you, but angels stood guard. They didn't see what it cost, but God counted every tear. You didn't glow because of the spotlight. You glowed because of the Spirit. That's the difference between a stage light and a soul light. One fades when the power's off. The other ignites in darkness. And that's what you've carried. The kind of light that doesn't need a room to shine. The kind of strength that doesn't wait for permission. You've walked through invisible battles, fought demons with no name, overcame sabotage with no witness. Yet your glow never dimmed. It deepened. You started praying differently, living differently, loving differently, and the world still hasn't caught up. They see your strength now, but not the surrender it took. They admire your peace, but not the war you had to win to hold it. They want your anointing, but not your ashes, because that's what your glow is made of. Ashes, scars, silence, sacrifice. It's made of nights when no one checked in, days when your own voice was the only encouragement you heard. It's made of the weight you carried, while still smiling, still giving, still believing. Let me say this clearly. You didn't glow because of praise. You glowed in spite of the absence of it. And that's what separates the called from the crowd. Anyone can shine when the world cheers, but only the chosen glow, when heaven is the only one watching. This is why you're dangerous now, because they can't figure out how you still kept becoming without their validation.
They threw shade, but you still carried light. They withheld support, but you still soared. They ghosted you, but God guarded you. And now your silent fire has become a wildfire, one they can't control, one they can't contain, one they can't explain. Do you want to know the secret? You stopped living for their claps and started living for his call. That's when everything shifted. You moved from seeking approval to walking in assignment, from performing to possessing, from hoping to be seen to knowing you are sent. Is why you're glowing now, not because life's been easy, but because fire made you holy. You are the kind of person who survives silence and still shows up with love, who's been broken, but never bitter, who's walked through fire, but still smells like worship. And listen to me carefully. That glow you carry isn't going anywhere because it's not tied to applause. It's tied to oil, and oil doesn't lose its power. When people leave, it gets purer. So let them watch, let them wonder. You don't owe anyone an explanation for how you made it without their affirmation. The silence trained you, the fire refined you, and the absence crowned you. You didn't need claps to keep going. You just needed one whisper from God. I see you, I'm proud of you, keep glowing. And you did. And now the world is about to see what heaven already celebrated. You are the silent fire. You are the living altar. And now you rise, not for them, but for him.
Part 6. Spirit-backed, the power they can't imitate. They tried to copy it. The way you speak, the way you carry peace into chaos, the way your presence shifts a room, the way your life feels, set apart. They tried to mirror your movements, tried to mimic your anointing, tried to recreate your fire. But what they didn't realize was this: you're not just gifted, you're spirit-backed. And that kind of power can't be faked. They could steal your phrases, but not your posture in prayer. They could echo your language, but not your intimacy with the Father. They could study your light, but not your oil, because this isn't something learned. It's something received, not by merit, not by mimicry, but by obedience. You've been through things they've only read about in journals. You've survived spiritual warfare they couldn't endure for a week. Your authority wasn't handed to you. It was forged in the furnace of fire, of fasting, of silent obedience when it would have been easier to retaliate. They thought your power was performative, but it was prophetic, and that's why they can't duplicate it. You see, imitation only works in the natural realm, but the realm you walk in is spiritual, and in that realm, credentials don't come from man, they come from the Holy Spirit. Your license to speak, to move, to command wasn't printed or sealed. You don't just walk into rooms. You're sent. You don't just speak. You release atmospheres. You don't just pray. You shake realms. This is why demons cried out when Jesus walked into a space. It wasn't his clothes.
It wasn't his tone. It was the spirit behind the man. Jesus, I know. Paul, I know. But who are you? Acts 19:15. Because in the spirit world, power has fingerprints, and you, chosen one, carry the scent of surrender. There are people who once laughed at your weakness, But now they sense the weight on your life. They can't explain it, but they feel it. The ones who doubted your rise are now disturbed by your resilience. They feel the authority in your silence, the peace that doesn't flinch, a glow that doesn't fade. And no matter how they try, they can't replicate it, because this power, it didn't come cheap. You paid for it. In tears no one saw, in fests no one clapped for, in obedience that cost you relationships. You stayed when it was lonely. You believed when it made no sense. You obeyed when it hurt. That's why heaven backs you. That's why your words carry weight. That's why your spirit doesn't bend when others panic. You're not loud. You're rooted. You're not flashy. You're favorite. You're not perfect. You're positioned. And when you move with power. Because when you speak, your words aren't empty. They're backed by warfare, backed by sacrifice, backed by divine timing. They may not understand it, but that's okay. Because oil can't be explained, only experienced. So walk boldly now. You've been quiet long enough. They need to know this isn't charisma. This isn't coincidence. This isn't charm. This is calling. And you carry it not because you're better, but because you are willing to be misunderstood, willing to be hidden, willing to be set apart. You were willing to carry what others dropped, to finish what others abandoned, to believe when others bowed to fear. And now you don't have to prove anything. The presence on your life speaks for itself. Let them talk. Let them wonder. Let them try to copy your glow. But they'll never understand the fire. I walked through to get it, because what covers you isn't man-made. It's not trend. It's not technique. It's not hype. It's holy. And it's heaven. It's spirit-backed.
Part 7. Divine Return. Why the backfire is just beginning. They never thought it would return. They assumed their rituals would vanish into the air, that their curses would stick, that their spiritual manipulation would work quietly, without consequence. But what they didn't know is this: every energy sent out returns. And when you target the anointed, the blowback is not just personal, it's prophetic, because you can't curse what heaven has crowned and expect peace to follow. The same fire they tried to burn you with has now turned on them, not because you prayed for revenge, not because you fought back with flesh, but because heaven keeps its promises. I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you I will curse. Genesis 12:3. That was never a threat. That was a covenant, a divine law written in spiritual stone, and now it's being fulfilled. This is the season of divine return, the reversal, the unraveling, the unveiling of every hidden plot. That was spoken in whispers and carried in shadows, and it begins now. You may have already felt it. The same people who once looked strong, now unraveling. The ones who gloated when you were in pain, now moving through storms of their own. Not because you cursed them, apology, but because they touched what was holy. You were never just a person to them. You were a mirror, and instead of healing what was cracked inside, they projected, they schemed, they chanted, they summoned, and now they're reaping what they sowed. You see, God doesn't miss. He's not petty. He's precise. And when his word says, "No weapon formed against you shall prosper," it doesn't mean the weapons won't be formed. It means they will fail and return to sender. Divine return doesn't always look dramatic. Sometimes it's subtle, dreams that won't let them rest, projects falling apart, relationships crumbling without reason. The same confusion they sent to you, now haunting their own path. It's not karma, it's justice. And justice always speaks. I've seen this in real life. A woman I knew was attacked spiritually by jealous voices. They lit candles. They cursed her name in the night. They called on deities not of God. For months, she felt disoriented. Doors shut. Dreams turned cold. Even her own home felt heavy. But she didn't retaliate. She worshipped. She fasted. She declared Psalm 91 aloud each morning. And slowly, things began to shift. Not just in her, but around her. Those who cursed her started to crumble. Businesses failed. Friendships fractured. Their names, once elevated, began to vanish. Because here's the truth. When you curse someone backed by heaven, you curse your own foundation. The stone you rolled toward them rolls back. The pit you dug becomes your prison. Whoever digs a pit will fall into it. If someone rolls a stone, it will roll back on them. Proverbs 26:27. That's not folklore. That's spiritual law. And God doesn't play when it comes to his chosen ones. Let this be your peace today. You didn't have to fight back. Because he fought for you. You didn't have to expose them. Because God is doing it now. He's revealing every witchcraft act, every gossiping tongue, every manipulating spirit, not with thunder, but with clarity, with silence, with fruitless fields, with prayers that no longer touch heaven because their hearts turned cold. And here's what's happening now. Heaven is returning what was stolen. The clarity, the energy, the favor. The harvest is being redistributed. What was delayed is being accelerated. The judgment is being delivered, not for punishment, but for correction. You won't have to lift a hand. You won't have to speak a word, because the backfire is beginning. And your only task? Remain aligned. When curses return, they don't knock first. They arrive like smoke, thick, choking, revealing what's been hidden. And when the smoke clears, you'll still be standing, not because you're better, but because you were covered. You were faithful. You were obedient. You were sealed. This isn't the time to gloat. It's the time to stay low. Stay holy. Stay hidden in God. Because divine return isn't about vindication alone. It's about consecration. The fire that broke their control is now preparing you to rise. The same fire they tried to weaponize is now clearing the path for your elevation. You'll know the season has turned when doors start opening again, when sleep becomes peaceful, when energy returns to your bones, when what was stolen comes back in double measure. And they'll watch from the sideline, silenced by the very power they tried to mock, because now heaven is speaking. And the backfire, it's only just begun. Part 8. Live like heaven already said yes. There comes a moment after the battle, after the fire, after the betrayal and the whispers and the warfare, where you must decide, will I live like I'm still under attack, or live like heaven already said yes? Because the curse didn't work, the trap didn't hold, the silence didn't silence you. You're still here. And that means something. This next season is not about survival. It's about arrival. You've already passed the test they never saw. You've already endured the fire they hoped would destroy you. Now comes the assignment. And your posture must shift. From defense to dominion. From waiting to walking. From wondering to worshipping in motion. You don't have to beg for open doors anymore. You walk like they're already swinging wide. You don't have to explain your glow. You wear it like confirmation. Because when heaven says yes, it's not a suggestion, it's a shift. It's not maybe, it's move. So let your actions preach louder than your pain. Buy the journal, write the vision, apply for the thing, build the brand, start the healing space. Say the prayer that changes your family line, not because it's easy, but because it's time. You already carry the yes. You're not trying to earn it. You're embodying it. The yes was spoken when you didn't even have language for your purpose. It echoed over your life when you were still stumbling through shadows, still unsure, still searching for proof. And heaven whispered, approved, appointed, already enough. That's why the attacks came so early. That's why the jealousy started before you even stepped into clarity. That's why you were fought in infancy, spiritually and literally, because the yes was ancient, stamped before time. So now, you don't owe this world's smallness anymore. You don't owe your past an apology. You don't owe your fear a seat at the table. You owe God your movement. Move like it's done. Live like the promise is alive. Walk like it's already written, because it is. For all the promises of God in Him are yes, and in Him amen. 2 Corinthians 1:20. That means your obedience is not in vain. Your dreams are not delusions. Your path is not random. You were sent. You were called. You were kept. And now you are activated. So don't wait for the applause. Don't stall for confirmation. Don't lower your vision because they can't see it yet. You are the confirmation. You are the shift. You are the one they weren't expecting. Because heaven already said yes. And when heaven says yes, hell can't say anything else. Part 9. The remnant rises. What hell fears most. They thought you'd stay scattered, shattered, alone in your wilderness seasons, exiled from everything familiar. But what they didn't know is that the wilderness wasn't punishment. It was preparation. It was recruitment for the remnant. Heaven has always had a remnant, a quiet few who don't blend in, who walk differently, who see what others ignore and then feel what others dismiss. You've always felt it, haven't you? That haunting strangeness, that divine difference, that ache for something more, something holy. You were never meant to fit in. You were born to stand apart. And now, it's time, not just for you to rise, but for the remnant to rise with you. This isn't just about your glow anymore. It's about the collective fire, rising from those the world thought were forgotten, the misfits, the spiritually sensitive, the warriors with invisible scars and prophetic wounds. They're rising now, and hell is trembling, because hell doesn't fear the crowd. Hell fears the remnant, the ones who pray in silence but shake the atmosphere, very peace that shatters confusion. Show up with no audience, just oil. Speak when heaven says speak. Stay hidden until God says go. That's who you are. You're not just a survivor of warfare. You're a leader in the next spiritual uprising. Your pain was a prophecy. Your rejection was a realignment. Your silence was a sanctification. And now, the call goes out. Remnant, rise. Take your place. Take your torch. Take back your territory. This is the moment where hidden ones are revealed, where prophets once buried in anonymity step into visibility, not for fame, but for fire. Because what's coming requires those who have been through something, those who've walked through night terrors and still lifted their hands in worship, those who've been falsely accused but never stopped interceding, those who know what it means to cry and still rise. That's you. That's us. We are the remnant, and we are ready to rise, not with noise, but with weight, not with crowds, but with confirmation, because what hell fears most is happening now. The remnant is no longer scattered. They are aligned. They are anointed. They are here. Part 10. The reward for enduring what no one saw. There are no medals for what you endured. No crowds clapping for the prayers you whispered in silence. No spotlight for the nights you wept and still worshipped. No viral moment for the way you kept walking. even when your spirit felt broken. But heaven saw it. Heaven saw everything. They didn't see the battle, but heaven did. They didn't feel the weight, but God measured every ounce. They didn't hear your cries, but the throne room did. And this next season isn't just compensation. It's vindication, not just for the pain, but for your posture. Because when others gave up, you stayed. You didn't curse God. You didn't compromise. You didn't collapse. You held the line. And now, God is about to reward you for what no one else saw. Your Father who sees what is done in secret, I will reward you openly. Matthew 6:6. This isn't about ego. It's about evidence. You've sowed in silence. Now comes the public bloom. The doors that once slammed shut are now begging to open. The people who overlooked you will watch God overtake you with favor. And the promises that once felt like distant dreams, now they're knocking on your door. Because here's the sacred truth. You didn't survive for nothing. Every night you stayed up interceding, heaven recorded. Every moment you chose purity over popularity, heaven applauded. Every battle you didn't brag about, every betrayal you forgave, every tear you sowed in the soil of obedience has become your harvest. And the harvest isn't just material, it's mastery. You don't cry over what you used to. You don't chase what you once craved. You don't bend for cheap applause anymore. Because now you know who you are. Now you've seen who God is. Now you've tasted the grace that makes no sense. And that changes everything. You thought you were being delayed, but you were being developed. You thought the isolation was a prison, but it was a palace in disguise. You thought you were forgotten, but you were being forged. And now the reward is coming. But not just any reward. This is the double portion season. Like Job, who lost everything, but received twice as much in return. Not because he was perfect, but because he didn't curse the process. That's you. You didn't understand it all, but you still trusted. And that trust has triggered a release. God is releasing favor that doesn't make sense. People will look at your life and wonder, how did that happen? And you'll know, it wasn't hustle, it wasn't strategy, it was harvest. It was what heaven had been holding, waiting for the moment your spirit was ready. Because God doesn't reward fast, He rewards faithful. This is the part where silence breaks into song, where mourning turns into dancing, where the oil starts to flow, where what you built in pain becomes a blessing to others in purpose. You are now the proof that endurance works, that obedience pays off, that nothing surrendered to God is ever wasted. This is your Esther moment, the one where the crown you never asked for is placed upon your head, not to elevate ego, but to save nations. This is your Joseph moment, the one where you stand in the palace and realize the pit was a prophecy, not a punishment. This is your Jesus moment, the one where resurrection follows betrayal, where what looked like an ending becomes the beginning of glory. So what is the reward? It's not just what's coming to you, it's what's been awakened in you. Wisdom that can't be faked, strength that can't be shaken, peace that makes no sense, discernment that reads the room before words are spoken. You've been trained, you've been tested, you've been trusted, and now you will be trusted with more. You're not just stepping into blessing.
You're stepping into authority, the kind of authority that makes the enemy nervous. And the atmosphere shift because now you know what it costs. Now you've counted the price. Now you won't bow to culture or settle for crumbs. You've seen too much. You've survived too much. And now you carry too much glory to ever live small again. The reward was never about the stuff. It was always about the stature, a spiritual elevation, the holy confidence, the divine knowing, the sacred weight that can only come from walking through fire and coming out refined, not reduced. So now walk in it because you earned it, not with pride, with posture, with purity, with perseverance. Reward, I think it's only the beginning.
You were always fireproof. There's a reason you're still standing, not because you dodged the fire, but because the fire never had the final say. They threw curses, but you carried covenant. They whispered destruction, but heaven declared destiny. And now you see it. Every weapon formed against you, it was proof of your anointing. Every silent storm, a sign that you were chosen before the world knew your name. You didn't just survive. You glowed through the grief. You grew through the warfare. And now, you rise, not as the same soul who once begged for relief, but as someone who walks with wisdom, moves with fire, and knows in your bones, I was always fireproof. If this message ignited something deep in your spirit, drop a comment below. I was always fireproof. If your survival is your testimony, share this message so another warrior can remember who they are. And if you believe stories like this deserve to keep shining, let God lead you to support the journey. You're not just walking out of the fire, you're walking into divine legacy.